Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Talk the Book Show. Like every new episode, we are bringing a new content with a new book review, with a new topic. Today, we have with us Sai Manohar Uttej, who is going to discuss our book review on Man's Search for Meaning. Sai Manohar Uttej is a technology leader by profession and a writer at heart. He graduated from IIT Guwahati and he has since built a career in software engineering. Currently serving as a lead engineer at a major networking company, he balances his technical expertise with a deep love for literature. His bookshelves are lined with works from literary giants like Haruki Murakami, Somerset Maugham, Vikram Seth, and Ayn Rand. Following his passion for storytelling, he has authored two fiction books, namely Yuga, and the second one is Love, Life, and Fiction. Today, Sai Manohar Uttej is going to book review a novel by Viktor Emil Frankl entitled Man's Search for Meaning. Now, let us invite Sai Uttej to deliver his book review. Welcome to you, Sai Uttej. You can continue now.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the. I hope I'm audible to you and clear.
Yes, you are loud and clear. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome all to the episode 196 of Talk the Book review series conducted by Andhra Pradesh State Council of Higher Education. My special thanks for a wonderful introduction by. This program is unique in its own discipline, catering to the literature world and the education universe in its own discipline. Because either of them, they look out for the literary people, they look out for book reviews, and the education people, people who are into education, they also want to know more and more about what are the best and classic books that are available in the literature, and they would want to dive deep with a bit of guidance into how to read into it. I think this Talk the Book show helps them at the very deep core. The series of book reviews also help people by acting as an international library for posterity. So going into the future, for entire world to look back and know about all the good books that exist in the literature world, the series of videos could be the very encyclopedia of it. All right, let's start with the book review. But before that, I would want to start with the one quote from this book that stuck with me since I first read this. Everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. This is the quote from this book that explains that you can take anything from the human mind, but given the circumstances, to choose one's own way with the right attitude, no one can take it away from him. That's the man's search of meaning, entire soul. So with this, let's dive into the book review, starting with discussing about the author and a little bit about the book. Viktor Frankl was professor of neurology and psychiatry at the University of Vienna Medical School until his death in 1997. He was a founder of what has come to be called the School of Logotherapy. School of Logotherapy is otherwise known as the third Viennese School of Psychotherapy, where the first one is Sigmund Freud's psychoanalysis, and the second one is Adler's individual psychology that talks about will to power. Born in 1905, Viktor Frankl received degrees of medicine and psychology and philosophy from University of Vienna. Now, during World War II is when he came to limelight because he spent 3 years at Auschwitz, Dachau, and other concentration camps. Concentration camps, I would tell you in deep as we go forward. But during this time is when he created a bit of manuscript while he's encapsulated inside the camp. And he first published a book called From Death Camp to Existentialism in 1946. Later, he added his own psychotherapy theory called logotherapy and added it as a second part of the book called Logotherapy in a Nutshell and changed the title to Man's Search for Meaning, which was eventually published in 1959. This has undergone many reprints and translations into various languages and has been labeled as one of the outstanding classics to emerge from the Holocaust. It is also called a remarkable tribute to hope and offers us an avenue to find greater meaning and purpose in life. This perhaps is one of the books I would place on my shelf of the great books I have had the opportunity to go through. I myself feel privileged to review this book and analyze this book in detail as part of APSCHC Talk the Book Review series. Now, let's talk about the book's title and why it is important to discuss. Man's Search for Meaning. As a young brain, maybe probably a brain that is between 20 to 35 or 15 to 35 years, we would feel that the first thing that gets to our mind reading the title is it a spiritual guide or is it too old a book for the young brain like me? Certainly not. This is not a book written by a monk or saint who has gone far from life, but a book written by a survivor, a person who lived almost feet away from the precarious gas chambers and yet found an attitude towards the unavoidable suffering and through that a way of life or his own philosophy to lead the life. As this is an account of facts and non-fiction for anyone who is more realistic and practical in life, irrespective of the age and status and the area he is living in or the conditions that he is staying in. This book really changes the perspective of life that he is looking at. Now, in this world of automation, everything is getting automated, where life itself might degrade to a stage where you don't have the meaning or the purpose to serve it or to lead it. At this point of time, to gain resilience towards these struggles or to not to go into distress due to lack of opportunities that this automated world could grab us away from, or the challenges that it throws, I would sure one find answers to these questions in this 1 hour of the book review that we would be traveling closely with this book, Man's Search for Meaning. So let's see how and why the man's search for meaning is that important, right? So before going into it, uh, before reading any book, it is important that we need to understand the context and periodic setting of the book. So why the context? This book is written during the context of the timeline of the book is during World War II. So this is when the Germany took control of Poland, Czech, Belgium, and other European countries. As you know, Adolf Hitler, the leader of the Nazi, really hated Jews, and his regime established concentration camps, claimed to be for the prisoners of the war, but in real, they were used for torture and extermination of the Jews. Among those concentration camps is the one called Auschwitz. Auschwitz is one of those concentration camps which is located in the Poland and around 50 kilometers from Krakow, which is a major city in Poland by that time. The camp was established in around 1939 and it became the largest of Nazis' concentration camps. It is known that during this Holocaust time, around 1 million Jews were exterminated at Auschwitz. So, in that Auschwitz concentration camp is where this book is born. So, you can understand the intensity of the book and the period that this has survived, and that itself implies us how factual this book is, right? So, the story actually sets in the timeline of Viktor's stay in Auschwitz. This non-fiction account also talks about his experiences in other concentration camps called Dachau from 1945 to 1942 to 45. So these concentration camps are very fearful, because of the infamous existence of gas chambers, where millions of Jews were exterminated and uh, they were gassed, signifying the world's greatest atrocity that a human mind, someone like Adolf Hitler, had executed on its fellow human race. During this intense war times and fight for survival, this book took birth, and hence the honesty and reality both juxtaposes into its writing. People who are into psychology or pursuing bachelor's or master's or researching into psychology, this book is much recommended and acts as a school of knowledge to dig deeper into the human mind. Before getting into the book, I would like to introduce few terms that this book might have, so that people who are not into behavioral sciences or not into any kind of awareness about what is psychology, I would like to explain few key terms that would help us understand the book even more better way. Right? Psychoanalysis. What is psychoanalysis? This focuses on understanding the unconscious mind and how it influences thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. It basically consists of a patient closing his eyes and speaking freely to the doctor about his thoughts. Thereby, the psychologist analyzes the unconscious mind. This is something that you would find in a very good investigative movie or something, but psychoanalysis is nothing but that. What is psychotherapy? In this book, Viktor Frankl mainly focuses that his understanding of survival is not about psychoanalysis, but it's about psychotherapy, which he calls this as logotherapy. Psychotherapy is a form of treatment, all like psychoanalysis only, but it's aimed at helping individuals address their emotional challenges through structured conversations with the trained therapist. So this doesn't involve any judgmental suggestions or offerings that the doctor might offer to the patient, but this is more of a structured conversation. What is a concentration camp? A concentration camp is a facility where large groups of people are detained under harsh and inhuman conditions, often without due process. Instead of using them for detention, forced labor, and punishment, Nazis actually used them to exterminate Jews using gas chambers. Then, what are gas chambers? Gas chambers were typically enclosed spaces that could hold a large number of people. So they were designed to appear as showers, basically somewhere we can bath. So the showers would be placed in row. They were designed to appear or other benign facilities. These were used to deceive the victims that these are just showers, but instead they used to execute people by poisoning them with lethal gas. So this is the context, period, terminology, and the setting of man's search for meaning. This is when Viktor E. Frankl actually gone through these experiences from 1942 to 45. So let's discuss a bit about the book's summary now. The summary of the book uh, goes like this. Basically, the book is divided into two parts. First part is called the experiences in a concentration camp. This is where Victor actually explains how his experiences were during concentration camp. And the second part is the logotherapy in a nutshell. So part one is where author experiencing the suffering, and part two is the psychotherapeutic theory that he has come up with. So they both complement each other. Excuse me. They both complement each other, as no theory is valid without practical or experience, and no experience is remembered without a lesson learned or a knowledge shared. So thereby they make a perfect pair, and that makes man's search for meaning a complete, wholesome, comprehensive study of human brain and the survival. In part one, he begins by saying that this book records suffering that took place not in large and famous camps, but also smaller ones. It talks not about the famous lives lost, but those unrecorded, unheard stories who sacrificed their lives in the fight for survival and injustice. Assuring that concentration camps shouldn't be looked at with pity and sentiment, but he says that it has to be looked at like the hard fights for existence that has taken place. So he always he ensures that to look at a problem, or to look at the phase of a life that is happening at a low period of time for any human being, he says that it has to be looked at like a hard fight for existence rather than a pity and sentiment. Even while explaining a few instances in the book, he says that the prisoners often say that no explanation is needed for those who lived inside the prison, and no explanation would suffice to make the understand people who lived outside. It's pretty real, right? So I would go ahead and tell you the problem that I faced, and you would not understand it, because how well I put in my words and make it more literary feasible and attractive, still it wouldn't make it a complete satisfactory explanation for you unless you be there and understand it. But the user also tells that the author also tells that the major aim for this book is not to make us understand the ways of torture that has happened in the camp, which have many more resources in the outside, available in the world, but the meaning that he has found through his survival in those places, right? So while analyzing the book, the World War One, psychology of prison life was studied, because the prison life till that point of till World War II was, you were given a sentence, let's say 20 years, 40 years, or a lifetime prison, or hanged with it. So you know what is coming to you, you know how much life you have to survive in the prison, and you have a certain understanding what you will be going to in a prison. Come with the World War II, the introduction of concentration camps have changed everything. Now, the very understanding of prison has changed it from predictability to unpredictability, where war of nerves have now been important. So, war of nerves means every now and then. So today, an officer might come and ask a 10 people to stand in a row, and they could be sent into gas chambers, or they could be sent into somewhere else where they don't know what they have to do. They would be put in hardships. In Poland, especially in the Europe, during winters, it is pretty negative degrees centigrade, which is difficult to survive for a normal human being without any protective wear or winter wear. But instead of all that, wearing a simple uh, cloth, more like our rice bag, made of a rice bag cloth, they used to survive outside the snow, making digging railway tracks and all that for the German army. So this is like uh, they have to fight every day. There is no due process, and an unexpected call to death might happen in any unjustified way at any point of time. So this is a different. That is why man's search for meaning has brought light into a new survival theory that says that even in the most unpredictable situations, you should be able to find the meaning. To understand the review, the major point of can start from the point where Arthur Viktor Frankl describes his experiences at concentration camp in the lens of mental health of his inmates, the prisoners around him, or the colleagues that he shared the concentration camp with, in three phases. He says the period following his admission, that is when he entered the camp; the period when he is well entrenched in camp routine, that is when he got attached to the camp routine day by day process of the concentration camp; and the period, excuse me, the period following his release and liberation. So, what he tries to tell is, as soon as when he was captured, he was put in a train, the train that has a capacity of 200 people, but 1,500 people were put in there. You understand the congestion inside the train while they were being taken from one camp to another camp. So the moment they got down from the station, and till the moment they went into the camp, slept for the night, and got into the next day, the whole process, you can understand the unpredictability that they have in their minds. They don't know whether the next minute they will be living or not. So this entire episode itself is a psychological discourse that paved the way for his man logotherapy, and also man's search for meaning as a book. So what happened is, once they arrived there, they would, they would have been asked to make a single queue, and an officer is sitting in a chair would look at the human being and would decide whether he's fit to work or he's not. When he's fit to work, he would go to the right. When he's not, he would go to the left. So other states that around 90% of people who has got on the train have gone to left, and the left is where the gas chamber is there or the crematorium is there, and the right are the ones who they feel are productive or useful, and they would put in the hardships of the work that normal humans cannot survive. So earlier, when we talked about the first stage of mental reactions, we told that right after the admission into the camp, he discusses different mental reactions. One of them is humor. Since they are put into the right side where they escaped the crematorium, other quotes that some of his inmates, they used to quote Fyodor Dostoevsky, who is a famous Russian author, man can get used to anything. So how they have developed humor vigorously. So, and then out of this humor, they also sometimes get curious about what would happen the next day, and mixing this curiosity, they would crack a joke at their own self tomorrow, right? As each day passed, the curiosity would develop into a surprise as the fact that they are still alive. So as, every day, any single mistake in the camp could cost hundreds of lives, right? Let's say any one guy would revolt, a single person could make the entire room filled with inmates burnt on the gas chambers. Yet, amidst all this, survival is a surprise to the inmates. But eventually, the inmates in the first phase would lose the fear from horrors of gas chambers, as it spared them from the act of having to commit suicide. Because the thought of suicide is definitely avoided, because they have been spared from the horrors of, they are not being taken to horrors of gas chambers. So that is why they have it has given them the strength to not to commit suicide. What Viktor E. Frankl says that an abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is a normal behavior, but a normal reaction to the abnormal situation is an abnormal behavior. That is when the phase two kicks in, right? Because the inmates get used to the camp routine as they slowly habituate apathy. When apathy hits them, at this stage, the longing for home and the disgust for the surroundings slowly die out. The homesickness that they develop would fade away. The inmates who were once general population with decent home, food, and work would get strong jolt of disgust looking at the vermin filling sleeping areas. The food shelters would be filled with typhus. So all this detaches from the thought as they adapt to the camp routine. For them, the suffering, dying, dead, they slowly everything becomes the same. So what happens is, a small unit a day, for example, filled with hourly tortures and fatigue appeared endless, but a larger time unit, perhaps a week, seemed to pass very quickly. All of his comrades indeed agreed to his statement: a day longer more than a week. This is what happens to us also when we hit the difficult times or the hardest path. Let's say a very deep low phase is happening in our life. Small units of time, which are days or hours, they go very slowly, but larger units of time, weeks and years, they go very quickly. We can think that a major tragedy happened in my life 3 years back, but thinking about it this hour or this day happens very slowly. Next year, excuse me. Thank you. Next year at the same time, we would think that the it has happened 4 years ago, but if we calculate in a smaller time units, it will be very slow. In the phase two, what happens is, in the phase one, when someone lashes them out, or just after the admission, when someone lashes them out, or they beats them, they don't actually they pain they feel a lot of pain physically. But in phase two, they understand the pain's actual meaning. They understand that the pain is a state of mind, and the pain is not physical, but the pain is not hurting, but one that attacks the mental state through an insult will start hurting him. So it's the insult that actually hurts and exemplifies the pain for the human being in the phase two. He states an example: when he was working on a railway track, the officer threw a stone at him and called him a pig. To get such an insult from a fellow human being after having lived a decent life is a strong demeaning of the inner strength that he carried. You would understand that pain is nothing but the insult that he has faced. So life would get back to primitive. The desire for food and shelter, as mentioned in the bottom row of Maslow's hierarchical structure, is where the inmates used to survive. Maslow's hierarchical structure in psychology generally means that it's a triangle where at the bottom you have food, shelter, and other things. At the top, you have something called self actualization. Self actualization is nothing but, in other words, man's search for meaning. So, author tells that when you are at the bottom stage of your life, you don't give up and think that surviving this is what I want. If you think about the self actualization or the peak of the Maslow's hierarchical structure, that is where your inner strength or inner core would get strengthened, and you would find the will to the meaning, which means the man's search for meaning is fulfilled, and that is will give the enough jolt to survive that phase. So he says that uh, the concentration camp itself is not necessary to find the meaning of life. For every person, there's an instance where he could find the meaning of life, right? In phase 2, he also tells that, when we are completely in that phase where, you get attached to the routine of your lowly life, he encounters the importance of love because he remembers his wife. There are two particular lines in the book that are very good. Just a second, excuse me. He says love towards his wife is something that made him survive because he imagined his wife, and in his words, he says, the love is the ultimate and highest goal to where a man can aspire. The salvation of man is through love and in love. Love finds its deepest meaning in his spiritual being, his inner self, where the physicality ceases to be of importance. He also tells during his phase, author tells that, excuse me, he realized how suffering is like a gas chamber. No matter the quantity, it fills the soul and conscious mind, no matter what the quantity is. You see, you release any gas in a room, it just fills the room, irrespective of the quantity that it is. So there is, we have to make sure that we need to understand that whether it is little or more, suffering has to be endured. We have to work suffering. So something like we have a job to do, we have to work on suffering like the job we have got to do. He says that at no point of his camp stay, he dared to judge other people because suffering is dealt with many people in many ways. So they would have found some meaning for existence and the purpose for life and are acting upon suffering in their own way. He says that no man should judge unless he asks himself in absolute honesty whether in a similar situation he might not have done the same. In this world of social media, the ease of passing judgment is as easy as taking a breath. But yet, to be that integrate, to not to do that, and let the world run as it is, can be known from this part of the book. As part one is ending, he quotes the most important line that I have started with my review with. He says, everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. He says that camp's inmates' mental reactions are eventually due to inner decisions, but not due to camp's conditions. Because apart from creation and enjoyment, which were, till then, creation of something used to be the meaning of life, then enjoyment, the pleasure has to be the meaning of life. But Viktor Frankl strongly says that suffering is also the one which finds meaning in life. Without suffering and life, human life is not complete. Everywhere, man is confronted with fate no matter what, but also with a choice of achieving something through that suffering. Nietzsche says that Friedrich Nietzsche is a well known philosopher from Germany who taught nihilism to everyone. He says that he who has a why to live for can bear with almost any how. So if you can get a why, then you can anyhow figure out how, right? He talks about how close the connection of mind, the courage and hope to his immunity. Courage and hope will answer the how, so that it gives a protective shield acting as an immunity to our body. So in those worsened physical conditions that the concentration camps are in, when you find the purpose of life, if you have the will to meaning, it will give rise to courage and hope, which will act as a protective shield and act as an immunity to their physical problems as well. He mentions that in December, there are a lot of camp deaths than any other time. What he tells that in their point, once the Christmas passed, The protective shield eventually, ending of the part one, he actually gives us a beautiful line saying that life ultimately to find the right answer to its problem and to fulfill the task which it constantly sets for each individual. So after we talked about cases, one is him getting admitted into the concentration camp, then getting attached to the camp. Now eventually the day of release came. So everyone from the concentration camp got released in somewhere around 1945. So he talks about the third phase post release from the camp, or something called liberation. In the third phase, he talks about depersonalization. Depersonalization you can put in terms of losing your personal self, losing the very thoughts that you used to have, losing the belief that something is existing somewhere, losing the belief that something is owned by you and it is yours from now. So he means to say that once they are liberated, they have got freedom. But to own the freedom, they are unable to believe that the freedom is theirs. So life after release, everything appeared unreal, unlikely, as in a dream. So they could not believe it was true. This phase can be confusing for most of the inmates. From that stage to become human being is what the third phase dealt with. So post the liberation, they have come from the concentration camps in a completely sub-primitive level, and now they have to become a human being. With in this phase, the meaning that they have configured in their minds through this survival is the only thing that will make sure take them from here. In the second part of the book, he talks something called about logotherapy. What is logotherapy? Logotherapy is a kind of psychotherapy. So if we get a disease, we go to a hospital, he gives a medicine, right? Similarly, if the mind gets a disease, in everywhere in the schools of medicine, they get a psychoanalytic therapy, or they get a logotherapy. So logotherapy is that famous in the world. What logotherapy does is it is striving to find a meaning in one's life that is the most powerful motivation force in our lives. Okay. When asked, so earlier when I talked about Sigmund Freud, I told about the will to pleasure, uh, also will to power by Adler. So this is a will to meaning by Viktor Frankl. So basically, man, however, is able to live and even to die for the sake of his ideal and values. Logotherapy explains the existential vacuum where he either wishes to do what other people do, that is called conformism, that is what we do, what others want us to do, or he does other people wish him to do. So, what other tell us to do, that is called totalitarian, totalitarian, totality, right? In essence of existence, he assures that the meaning has to be found in world rather than his own psyche as a closed system. So, as he keeps saying, man search for meaning, he always says that we should find the meaning in the world rather than on our own psyche. So, in the existence and in practicality, if you are able to find meaning, that is what drives the person to a much life force. So, in CRISP, logotherapy tells what we can find meaning in three different ways. One, by creating a work or doing a deed, by experiencing something or encountering someone, by the attitude we take toward unavoidable suffering. So, three things. Man's search for meaning can be done in work, love, or suffering. So, these three things are enough to find meaning. Whatever you're going through today, just think twice in the love, in the work, in the suffering that you have endured. Were you able to capture this meaning or purpose for today's life? But he clearly makes it clear that people ask him, you have told a lot of suffering here, so you do you mean to say that if I get a suffering, should I definitely go through it no matter what? So what he says is, but let me make it perfectly clear that in no way is suffering necessary to find meaning. I only insist that meaning is possible even in spite of suffering, provided certainly that the suffering is unavoidable. If it were avoidable, however, the meaningful thing to do would be to remove its cause, be it psychological, biological, or political. To suffer unnecessarily is masochistic rather than heroic, right? So he says that in spite of suffering, you can find meaning. Whenever it is unavoidable, you have to find meaning. Whenever it is avoidable, the meaningful thing to do is to eliminate the cause, whether it is psychological, biological, or political. Something like concentration camp. Let's say one day someone comes to your house. Since are you a Jew? Okay. He picked them up, put it in a train, taken them a concentration camp, and then every day they were put in a choice whether they go to crematorium or die, or put a hardship to work tirelessly in snow, heat, everything without proper food and shelter, and amongst diseases. So this is something like unavoidable, and still he says we have to find meaning in that. So as I am coming into the my book review, I hope you understood the book summary and my views on different points that Viktor Frankl has come up with. I would also end my talk by saying that how this book can shape our lives, right? As we reflect on Viktor Frankl's insights, we realize that his experiences and teachings are not confined to the horrors of the Holocaust. They transcend time and circumstance. Man's search for meaning reminds us that life, no matter how difficult, always holds the potential for meaning. In our modern lives, where uncertainty, stress, and challenges are inevitable, Frank's message can serve as a guide to focus on what truly matters, to choose hope and purpose over despair, and to recognize that even in suffering, we have the power to find meaning. This book teaches us that we are not merely shaped by the circumstances of our lives, but how we respond to them. By asking ourselves, what is the meaning of this moment? How can I use my experiences to grow? We take the first step toward shaping a life filled with purpose and fulfillment. Perhaps the most transformative lesson of the book is that meaning is not something we wait for, it's something we create, right? Each of us has the opportunity to bring meaning into our lives through the choices we make, the love we give, the work we do, the suffering we endure, the courage we show in the face of that adversity. Frankel's, word, Frankel's words challenge us to live deliberately and authentically. He always stresses how decent one has to be, even the suffering is overcome us, to seek out the unique purpose that only we can fulfill in this world. He also tells that you have to find the meaning, a unique meaning, because you are a unique person in this world. There are billions of people in this world, yet each of us can have a unique meaning for the purpose of life to endure. I encourage every one of us who are watching this or would watch this in the future to take these lessons into your own life, whether it's through the work you do, the relationships you nurture, or the challenges you overcome, or the suffering you go through. May you find meaning, and in doing so, shape a life that resonates with purpose and resilience. I had fun talking about this book. This is one of my favorite books. I hope you read this book. This is a must read for everyone, every young mind out there, to understand man's purpose and to find meaning even in the deepest of the sufferings. Thank you for being part of my journey today. Thanks, APSCHE, for the opportunity. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Uttej, for reviewing a good book for our viewers.
Thank you.
Man's Search for Meaning is a book by Viktor Frankl in 1946, chronicling his experience as a prisoner and a Holocaust survivor in Nazi concentration camps during the Second World War. And he described his psychotherapeutic method called logotherapy, as Uttej has rightly mentioned, which involved identifying a purpose to each person's life. Since its publication, this book has sold millions of copies and been translated into over 20 languages. It has become a cornerstone in psychology, philosophy, and self-help literature. So I thank once again Uttej for bringing this wonderful review for us. We will come back with another interesting book review in our next episode. Thank you very much.
Thank you.